Hello YouTube, welcome to my channel. Thanks for your likes and subscriptions, very much appreciated. You see me coming back from Porchester Castle. This is the only nice day we're going to get around here for a little while, so I'm taking the opportunity, let's say, to do my research for this week's history slot, which is going to be called Porchester Castle. What else have I got for you this week? I'm going to do the Vincent motorbikes, a history of. There is an immense amount of history on Vincent, even though it didn't last for all that long, to be honest with you, 1928 to 55. So it's sorry, excuse me. It's not going to be a short one, but I've tried to condense it into a smaller package, because otherwise I'll go over time. I do consciously try to keep my blogs in around about the 15 minutes, anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes. I do know, I am fully aware, because I've experienced it myself, that anything longer than that tends to get a bit samey. And I am trying out, well, I say trying out, I'm using, because I bought it, the Beeline Moto 2. I think you can probably see it at the bottom of the screen there, to the right of my digital display. And so far, I've found it to be very, very good and totally useful. I do know most of the roads around here, but I must admit there's one or two I go down and go, oh, hello, I've never been here before. So it's a very handy piece of kit to have. And I'm sure if I get in the middle of nowhere and I don't know where I am, it will help me get home. Sat nav is okay, but you get that voice in your ears all the time, and just when you're trying to speak on here, it interrupts you and causes you to pause. So there's no voice on it. You can have voice on this. You set it up, you have to pay your monthly subscription of £3.99, and it gives you a couple of other benefits as well. But generally, that's quite cheap, really. I mean, you consider some subscriptions are about £10.99, not for things like this. But yeah, it's actually very good. And I think for the actual device, I did have the first one. Sorry to interrupt. I did have the first one, the Moto 1. But I found that a little bit difficult to get on with. It was the bit that's telling me which way to go as such was just a big arrow, and the bit that is telling me look, turn left, turn right here, or what's coming up, was quite small. And for the likes of me, who needs distance glasses for riding, it was a little bit difficult to see. This, on the other hand, as you can probably see, has the let me point you right down a little bit more. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Yeah, it's it is very, very good, and I would give it 10 out of 10. It's spot on, you can't fault it. And when I get a chance to use my hand, hopefully here, I'll show you what else it does. Well, not for long. But you've also got the time of the journey and distance, the speedometer, and I shall let that run for a little bit so you can see how accurate it is to the actual clock, to my actual bike. Not a good place to stop, never mind. I think you've seen me go through this road, or along this road, many times, but there have been roadworks up until just this last week. Now it's all clear and up and running, and they've actually got lights on this junction, which is a bit better, because last time you had to wait for a gap. Now there's lights, so you've got all that time to get out, which is great. So That's the speedometer. It also brings up the speed limit. So if you're doing 31, it'll bring up a 30-mile-an-hour limit. This also shows me the distance I've gone so far. So Porchester Castle is 2.7 miles behind me. And right now I've got it pointing me to Leon Solent. I do like Leon Solent, as you've probably gathered, through a lovely cup of tea in the Bluebird Cafe. And a lovely breakfast wrap. So I'm just going to use the run up to Lee now in silence so I can fit some the history of Porchester Castle in. So, Porchester Castle. While I'm talking, I'll display a series of photos from my visit, and I'll also interject some historical stuff as we go along. So, situated in the water's edge of Porchester, overlooking Portsmouth Harbour, Porchester Castle is reputed to be the best preserved castle of its age in the country. Although an exact date isn't known, it's believed that the castle was built sometime around 284 to 290 AD. Originally a Roman fortress, Marcus Aurelius Carausius, easy for me to say, was commissioned by the emperor to clear the North Sea of pirates, but after being accused of profiteering from the venture by only attacking heavily laden boats and taking their treasures, he found himself the subject of a plot to execute him. To preempt this, he declared himself emperor, but he was assassinated by one of his followers, who then declared himself emperor. I tell you all of this because the development of Porchester Castle can be tied in with these events to ward off barbarian attacks along the coast of Gaul and Britain, which was a big problem in those early days of the Roman occupation. So throughout the late 3rd century, several fortresses were constructed to combat them, one of which was Porchester. The various fortresses have one thing in common, and that was the D-shaped towers, and so a fairly comprehensive defence of the coastline was established. Porchester Castle is reputed to be one of the best preserved castles, and many Roman artefacts have been found during the various archaeological digs. And so time marched on, and the use of the fort soon manifested to that of royalty after the Roman collapse, and it falls into the hands of the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century, and the occupation and partial further development continued through the Norman conquest of 1066. Lack of evidence makes it difficult to ascertain how much development took place at this time, and it is a theory that the Roman defences remained unchanged. There was further development of the interior, but again, no one is absolutely sure how much and when at this point. There have been foundations and 10th century artefacts found, and a hall and tower discovered in the southwest corner, and possibly a belfry. There is also evidence that some parts of the inner land were ploughed and cultivated. Through the next 100 years or so, the castle, or fort as it may still have been known, changed ownership to William de Pont de l'Arche. That's easy for me to say. Who was probably the main instigator of developing it in stone. He also found an Augustine priory within the walls. The church is believed to have already been constructed before this event though, and this picture shows the build of the keep and forebuilding. In the 1390s, King Richard II was responsible for extensive rebuilds of the castle and remodelled the keep to make royal apartments, which is now its present form, backed up by lots of documents for the build. And so time marches on through the medieval time. After Richard's death, King Henry V confronted conspirators, which was known as the Southampton Plot, which was celebrated by William Shakespeare. Despite the economic prosperity of Portsmouth, the castle was described as being right ruinous and feeble in 1441. Despite this, King Henry VI chose the castle as a landing place for his bride, Margaret of Anjou. In 1535, Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn visited the castle, fortunes changed, and England was at war with France. occupying the French port of Le Havre, so the fort became a hospital. In 1632, the castle was purchased by Sir William Uvedale, and 20 years later it was used as a prisoner of war prison for approximately 500 prisoners. To this day, their graffiti can still be seen etched into the walls of the top floor of the keep and other places. Unfortunately, the day of my visit, rain had leaked through the roof, so the top floor was out of bounds, so no photos. In 1776, over 2,000 Caribbean prisoners of war were held in the castle, and what didn't fit in the castle were housed in prison boats or hulks in Portsmouth Harbour. Today, the castle is, like many other historical places in this area, part of the heritage sites. There is a fee to visit the inner keep, but much of the grounds are open to the public for free and can be accessed at both the north and south entrances. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I tried to make it brief because there is so much history, obviously, for a fort or from a castle of that age. Obviously, if you want to learn more, it's all on the internet, or you can go and visit instead. It's well worth a visit, really is. I was in awe all the way through it. On my second video, I think I mentioned that if people make suggestions about which motorbike they'd like me to talk about, I would try and include it in my videos. Since then, I've had quite a few suggestions. Scott's, for instance, was one of the suggestions. But also this week, I got a suggestion for Vincent. So this week, I'm going to cover the Vincent motorcycle. Vincent Motorcycles was a British manufacturer from 1928 to 1955. Vincent Motorcycles, the manufacturers of the world's fastest motorcycles, began with the purchase of HRD Motors Limited, Leicester factory premises, by Philip Vincent in May 1928. HRD was founded by the British Royal Flying Corps pilot Howard Raymond Davis, who was shot down and captured by the Germans in 1917. Legend has it that while he was a prisoner of war, he conceived the idea of building his own motorcycle and contemplated how he might achieve that. Philip Vincent was advised to start production under an established name. He had built a motorcycle of his own in 1927 and in 1928 had registered a patent for a cantilever rear suspension of his own design. With the backing of his family wealth from cattle ranching in Argentina, Vincent acquired the trademark, goodwill and remaining components of HRD from Humphreys for £450 in 1928. Between 1928 and 1935, Philip Vincent bought in Jap engines for their bikes. Then after disastrous Isle of Man TT results in 1934, with engine problems and all three entries failing to finish, Philip Vincent and Phil Irving decided to build their own engines. Before that, though, in 1932, Phil Vincent was experimented with three-wheeled vehicles, amphibious vehicles and automobiles. When the first three-wheeler, the Vincent Bantam, appeared, it was powered by a 293cc Villiers engine, and it was 2.5 hundredweight delivery van with a car seat and a steering wheel. The Bantam cost £57 10 shillings, and the windscreen and hood option cost £5 10 shillings extra, but only after moderate success they ceased production in 1936. Also, while working in his office at Stevenage in 1936, Phil Irving noticed that two drawings of the Vincent HRD lay one on top of the other, in a V formation. He set them out on the drawing board as a V-twin engine in a frame that Vincent's had made for a record attempt by Eric Fernahau, who no longer required it. When Philip Vincent saw the drawing, he was immediately enthusiastic, and a few weeks later the first Vincent 1000 had been made. With Meteor upper engine parts mounted on new crankcases,
the Vincent V-twin motorcycle incorporated a number of new innovative ideas, some of which were more successful than others. The two new engines were developed on single cylinder in 500cc and a V-twin 1000cc capacities. Production grew from 1936. Although the war halted production, the most famous models were developed from the original designs after the war period in the late 1940s. In 1948, Vincent Black Shadow was, at the time, the world's fastest production motorcycle. The company was promptly renamed Vincent HRD Company Limited, and production moved to Stonehenge. The new trademark had the Vincent in very small letters above the large HRD, and after World War II, Britain had an export drive to repay its war debts, and from the USA was the largest market for motorcycles. So, from 1950, the HRD was dropped from the name to avoid any confusion with HD of Harley-Davidson, and the motorcycle became the Vincent. In 1950, the Vincent Comet was born. The bike, a single-cylinder thumper, offered high performance at a lower price than the company's V-twins, a sort of sensible performance bike. A fast machine in its day is practically all but forgotten. At around the same time, the Meteor came into existence. The Meteor was lower priced with lower performance to match. The Comet came with a higher price tag and more muscle packed into the engine. One of the most notable differences between the cheaper singles and Vincent's pricier V-twins is the gearbox. Vincent went with the 4-speed gearbox for the singles and clutch from Berman, which saved money. The engine internals were generally not fettled to the same level as the Rapide, the Black Shadow or other performance models. In 1949, Vincent released a lot of capital to produce a bike for the US market, a Vincent engined prototype Indian, which was called the Vindian. Unfortunately, the company never recovered from the release of such large amounts of capital, and so in 1952 financial losses were experienced, and sadly in 1955 the company discontinued motorcycle production after experiencing further heavy financial losses that they could never recover from. At the annual dinner of the Vincent HRD Owners Club in the summer of 1955, Phil Vincent announced that the company would no longer continue in the face of heavy losses and the production of motorcycles would cease almost immediately. In 1955, 1 week before Christmas, the last Vincent came off the production line. Today, there are many examples in museums and a great deal of bikes in excellent running order in the hands of collectors and enthusiasts. I hope you found it interesting. Next week I'll be reviewing the history of the Panther Motorcycle Company. So that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Next week I'm not sure about the history, we'll have to see. I do plan on doing the Panther Bike Company. We'll see how that goes. But until then, stay safe, ride safe, and I'll see you next time.